broadcast for shooters, hunters, and gun enthusiasts. This is the Firearms Radio Network.
I'm Nikki Turpeaux, host of Firearms Insider Radio here at SHOT Show 2014 with my next awesome guest, Mr. Claude Werner. And Claude and I have known each other for several years now, and if you've ever heard any type of television or radio interview where I'm being interviewed, I always mention Mr. Claude Werner is one of my favorite and most influential mentors. So it means a lot to have him here with me at the Access Sites booth here at SHOT Show. So Claude, if you would, tell the listeners and the viewers a little bit about yourself.
I'm a retired Army officer, and my influence with firearms goes back a long way. My father and my grandfather were both bodyguards for politicians in Chicago.
Wow.
So my dad taught me to shoot when I was about 8 years old, and I've been at it ever since. Spent some time in the Rangers, Special Forces, which my time in Special Forces has really influenced me a lot in this business, because a lot of that revolves around teaching foreign nationals about how to use weapons and tactics and so forth. And so I bring a little bit of a different perspective to that sort of way of looking at the industry than a lot of my colleagues have. And I was for a while the chief instructor, as you know, at Bill Rogers Shooting School in LJ, and I preface that with saying it should always be referred to as the elite Rogers Shooting School.
Yes, absolutely.
Because it is the hardest shooting school in the world. And
I can attest to that. I know. I've been there.
Very high performance standards, which once again has influenced me in the way I look at shooting and training and what people need to do and what they should be able to do and what they can do. And sometimes there's a dichotomy between what they really need to be able to do, but then what the ultimate end project can be. And I think that's important. Also been shooting IDPA for 15 years now. I'm the Georgia and Alabama area coordinator, so I look at all the major matches. I shoot IDPA very regularly, 2-3 matches a month at least. I've won, I think, 6 state championships with snub-nose revolvers.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that one of my mentors, Andy Stanford, many years ago said, Claude, you need to become the snubby guy.
And you have
I've
done it
worked
well.
on that.
Yes, you've done a lot with snub-nose revolver. And you always look very nice when you're doing it too. You always dress really, really well.
I eschew all things tactical when it comes to clothes.
Yes. Between the safety vests and the bow ties and your suits, you always have a definite flair for fashion that is not the weekend warrior type of tactical gear. So I appreciate that about you.
Well, and the fact that I have a certificate in interior decorating may have something to do with that.
I think it does, Claude, and I have to say that is one of the most interesting things. That when I found out that you had an interior design degree, I thought, first I was like, what? And then I thought, well, you know what? That actually kind of makes sense the more I thought about it. So I have to say that, yeah, I'm sure that influences your flair for fashion. So it's not a bad thing. It's probably something that the listeners and the viewers would like to know about you. If they need any interior design advice, then they can also talk to you about that.
I am probably the foremost expert on creating the man room that celebrates me.
There you go. Maybe that should be your tagline. Claude Werner Interior Design, celebrate me. It's not a bad thing. Well, tell the listeners a little bit about some of your highlights from 2013. I know we just finished a year. We're off to a new year. I know you were one of my guest instructors at the anniversary event weekend for Archangel Tactical. So tell us a little bit about what went on.
One of the things that I'm really interested in is marksmanship programs, and I mean that in the sense of programs for the new owner of a gun. So you walk out of the gun store, what do you do with it? And the NRA has developed a very good program, actually a couple of them, in the past 2 years I think it's been out now, called the NRA Marksmanship Qualification Program, defensive pistol 1 and defensive pistol 2. So at your anniversary event, we did defensive pistol 1, and it's actually a really good program because it's very progressive in the sense of it starts at a entry level and works up to some fairly involved tasks, which much more involve time limits on them. And I really like that idea because in my classes, I want to give the students something to take away from the class. In many cases, when people go to classes, they're kind of like, okay, paramniasic, velasicorum, you're now trained. And as my colleague James Yeager puts it, your training is only a down payment on your skill.
Right.
So I really like that about the NRA program, and I enjoyed introducing it to some people at the anniversary event as a way of showing people that you have a sequence of tasks that you can do that in some cases are only 20 rounds.
Right.
I think we only shot less than 50 rounds at the anniversary event, and I really want to promote that more because I think that's something that really helps people out because it's not intimidating to start.
Right. And you can see some progression. If you've got someone who's newer to the shooting world, they come into the class, you set the objectives, you give them the opportunity to achieve those objectives, and at the end of the class, they walk away with a certificate that says, I've achieved X, Y, and Z, and then they can look ahead to what's next in that training, what's next in the program. They've got, as you always tell me, measuring yourself is very important. Having some type of quantitative, qualitative way to measure where you are and where you need to be is one of the most fundamental things about training. Is you've got to have checkpoints. You've got to have measurement of how you're doing and how you're progressing. So.
And I think that when we measure things, that also gives people confidence.
Yeah.
Because up until that, people are smart. I really believe that people are smart, and they want to know, well, where am I? Just as in any journey, where am I? And so when they achieve, let's say, the pro marksman level, like we did at the anniversary event, okay, I'm here. Where's next? Okay, now I can go to the marksman first class, sharpshooter expert, distinguished expert, and it gives them a guideline and a set of goals to achieve, and that builds in their mind the idea that they're competent.
Right.
And I think anybody that has any kind of mechanical device, gun, car, pressure cooker, you want to feel like you know what you're doing with it. And if you don't measure your results, then how do you know? So I really like that program. I was glad that I was able to start introducing that into my classes, into the anniversary event in 2013, and I'm going to be pushing that even more into 2014 because I think it's a good program and very worthwhile. And because it's from the NRA, a national organization, it's not like for you or I to say in our classes, well, you've passed the Archangel Tactical qualification course or the Firearms Safety Training LLC qualification course. This is something, okay, the NRA says this. And let's face it, the NRA is the 800-pound gorilla in the training room.
And it's a name that even if you're not a shooter, even if you're not a gun owner, you know who the NRA is. And so it's the most widely recognized gun-affiliated organization. And for them to say this is a good training program, this is a good qualification for you, it gives a lot of credibility, it gets a lot of people's attention. But yeah, I think you're exactly right. Having some way of measuring your skill is important. And also for people to have some type of an emotional tie to what they're doing and feeling that sense of competence, feeling that sense of accomplishment, and that they've got something tangible to put on their brag wall at home or to put up on their desk or in their office at work, right there, I love me you all. People like that kind of thing. And I think that having something else like the next challenge to set up, the next level to achieve, what's after that, then it becomes just kind of like you're really wanting to excel at something that could potentially save your life. So I think getting that emotional connection, particularly for the women, because I know when I first started learning to shoot, I enjoyed it, and the more that I learned, the more that I wanted to learn, and having those benchmarks and having those those ways of evaluating where I was and where I wanted to be and how is the best way to get there. But absolutely having some type of a standard to measure yourself by is very important. That's one of the best lessons that you've taught me. And so tell the viewers and the listeners a little bit about your background. I know you said you've got your interior design degree, but why the firearms industry? Why have you committed your life and your work so wholeheartedly to this industry and to the people who need your services?
It's so important that people be able to defend themselves. I grew up in kind of not a real bad neighborhood in Chicago, but sort of a bad neighborhood. And one of my observations was the people who at least had some inkling of how to defend themselves tended to be able to negotiate the obstacles of urban life better than people who didn't. And the wonderful thing about firearms is the fact of the matter is that they put a 75-year-old elderly woman on a footing where she can deal with successfully a young, strong, aggressive predator. And so to the extent that I can facilitate that for anybody's life, and it doesn't even have to be, we think about elderly people and women, but in my case, at one point I had ankle surgery and was in a boot on crutches.
Limited ability to move around or run away.
And yeah, that's it. It was just not going to happen. And I was targeted by 3 thugs on the subway in Atlanta. Well, I fortunately had a .38 snub in my pocket, and there was no verbal interaction between us at all. They targeted me, they just started coming toward me, and like you said, I had no mobility or anything, and so the expected reaction from them was that I was going to try to hobble away, and instead I just turned around, I faced them, I stuck my hand in my pocket, and got my hand on my gun, and I don't believe I said anything out loud to them, but I said to myself, guys, this is not going to turn out the way you think it is. And as soon as I said that, the Marine Corps drill team could not have done a better right flank march than those 3 guys. It was just like, and away they went. Well, that's what the firearm does for any of us, is it allows us to even the score. And I just have a great deal of desire that people should have that opportunity, because 99% of people are good people. They want to do their life, live their life, not bother anybody. And it's the 1% or less that kind of messes that deal up. So to the extent that we, as the good people, the 99%, take back our space and just say, you're not going to harm me, you're not going to harm my family, you're not going to harm my friends because I'm armed. That's important to me. I want people to have that feeling to not live their life in fear. They need to be aware and be cautious, but not live their life in fear. And I think that having a firearm and feeling that confidence and that confidence in their ability to use the firearm, that goes a long way toward that.
I think so too. And what I experienced when I was learning to shoot is that it changed me. It changed something about my countenance. It changed my level of confidence, and that air of, living and moving about town from point A to point B with a purpose. And you do face potential threats in a different way. You do know what your skill level is, what you're capable of doing, and it does level the playing field. And even if you never have to pull that gun out, knowing that you have it, just whatever vibe it gives off to that potential predator or to that threat, it changes their approach. Once they see that you're a person who is not going to hobble away, that you're going to stand and face them, and they don't want to fight. They don't want someone who's going to fight back. They want someone who is a perceived, path of least resistance.
That's right.
It's going to be an easy target. And the more you train, the more you learn, the more confidence you build, the more skill that you build, I think it minimizes the way that you communicate that you're a victim to other people that are watching.
One of my mentors, John Farnham, has a great way of expressing that. he talks about failing the victimization interview. And it's like you say, it's a way
when
that
they
you
profile
carry
you.
yourself. Because criminals, for the most part, have been at this a long time, and they've learned to recognize this is a victim, this is a fighter. And they're looking for the victim, not the fighter. So that to the extent that we give off whatever that air or contents, whatever you want to say, this just isn't going to be a victimization. This is going to be a fight. Well, they're, like you said, they're going to go to the path of least resistance. There's somebody right over there that is not a fighter. And I hate to pass them off on someone else, but I'm actually not, because what it's doing is it's eating their time. They have, 8-10 hours in the day and can only conduct so many interviews.
Yeah.
So if everybody failed the interview, eventually they'd just be really hungry as predators.
They're running out of time in a day.
Another day, another no dollar.
That's right.
So I think that's important that we convey that to them. Say, look, I'm not afraid of you. I'm aware of you, but I'm not afraid of you.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the most fascinating things about getting to know you and training with you and talking with you, we always have these great conversations. I really enjoy the mental aspect, the mindset aspect, and the diagnosis of events that have happened, things that have unfolded, and having the conversations about, well, this is where it failed, or this is where it succeeded, or this was the crossroads where there was a decision to be made, and kind of analyzing those situations to learn from them. I like how you diagnose and you diagram these different things to actually take the time to mentally walk through a scenario and think through it ahead of time, so that if in the event something like that were to unfold later, that a person has had an opportunity to put themselves in that situation and actually think through it while they're not under duress.
I've seen this before, and this is what worked, and this is what didn't. And I think that, the wonderful thing about us living in the age of information, the internet, and various publications. I read the Armed Citizen column in the NRA publications every month religiously. If I don't read anything else in the magazine, I read that. And it tells me how these victimizations get set up. Now granted, the Armed Citizen is all about how did they pass, how did the defender actually pass the scenario, and I think that's good, because then, you have this model of saying, well, they did this and that worked out well, and then in the news, you'll see the opposite of it.
Right.
Well, they did this and that didn't work out that well, so let's model ourselves on the ones that worked out well and didn't work out well. And there's just an enormous amount of information that's available to us now. I believe you and I have talked about how interested I am now in the Los Angeles Police Department's categorical use of force reports, where they have that online of every shooting incident that the LAPD was involved in from 2005 to 2012 in great detail. And so that, when I look through that, and in some of them, how I do it with my little... I
love the way you diagram out these different things. I love it.
I have my little policemen that I put down in the cars and everything, and then create a model of, okay, this is what worked, this is how it could be solved, perhaps even better in the future. And then if that ever happened to me, it's not the first time. As Bill Rogers, both of our mentors, talks about the fact that ability to see the situation and have a plan in your head ahead of time allows you to execute it a lot better, because then you don't have to think about it. You're not consuming your processing power.
Right.
You're formulating.
You don't have that computer screen hourglass going and suspending your time, because hesitation is where we wind up getting ourselves in trouble. The longer we wait, we move into the initiative deficit category instead of maintaining the initiative advantage, which I also learned from you, which is a phenomenal way to look at it. And I think that you have to think through some of these things so that you have some base of familiarity to draw from.
And credit to our colleague Craig Douglas for the initiative deficit
initiative
idea.
advantage.
That he's the one that has really popularized that, but I think that's a really good way of looking at it, that we have time and distance involved in any of those circumstances. And so to the extent that we recognize it at a greater distance, then we have more time to deal with it, more time to project that confidence. For instance, in my subway incident, I saw those guys coming 15 yards away. Well, 15 yards at a walk takes a certain amount of time, as opposed to, well, if they were 15 inches away from me.
Right. That would have been a very different.
Yeah, then I'm in the initiative deficit category, and I don't want to be there. So that's something that I've always been interested in, and actually I'll be working on that this year and hopefully beginning of next year, the idea of how to sand table model private citizen incidents, as opposed to, in the Army, that's a very commonly used technique where you construct a sand table and, okay, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. Well, I'd like to remake some of that, which some of my little scenarios already are, but I'd like to put it in the sense of more of a training aspect of, okay, here's the situation, what are you going to do about it? Then my students will be able to say, well, let me think about that, and they've got the time to think about it, because
when it happens, there's no time.
Yeah, and at the point where they're doing the training, well, the little man isn't going to move until I move.
Right.
So, okay, what do you think you're going to do? Well, let me think about it. Okay, go ahead.
And if you move the little man here and that was a bad choice, you can move it right back and start over.
That's right. We can remediate the circumstances.
And in real life, you don't get to do reverse.
Exactly.
You get one shot, and you better hope it works out to your advantage, because if you haven't thought about it and it starts to unfold, there's no time. A lot of situations, like you said, 15 yards or 15 inches, it's a big difference, and you just don't ever know when a threat's going to bite you.
Yes.
Yeah, you just never know. So if you can, Claude, if you would tell the listeners and the viewers a little bit more about how they can find you and learn more about your training that you offer.
My website is www.firearms-safety-llc.com. And I also have 2 Facebook pages, a personal one and a Claude Werner author page, in which I post a lot of my articles. And also you can find my blog is atl-firearms-examiner.com.
Yeah, so I encourage you to read more about Claude, follow him on Facebook, and I can guarantee you that he will share with you some really interesting information and sometimes some rather humorous information. I love Claude's sense of humor and his perspective, so I welcome you to follow him, learn more, train with him. I can promise you that you will not be sorry. He's one of my favorite mentors in the industry and a very valued friend. So thanks for taking time to join me here at SHOT Show 2014. And is there anything special that you're looking forward to seeing this week?
I'm actually looking for 2 things in particular. Pocket pistols, since they've become very popular of late, and laser and other training devices that people who don't have a chance to go to the range to practice can use. So there'll be more about those on my blog after the SHOT Show.
Yeah, your after action report.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us, Claude.
My pleasure.
I'll be catching up with you again later in 2014, and I'll have you back on Firearms Insider Radio.
Oh, that's great, Nikki. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, I'm Nikki Turpeaux here at the Excess Sights booth at SHOT Show 2014, and stick around. We'll have more interviews coming up later on.
This has been a production of the Firearms Radio Network. You can find more information at firearmsradio.tv.